The call came at 4:47 in the morning. Camille James had not slept. She was still at her kitchen table in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by folders she had organized, color-coded, and cross-referenced for the last 6 hours. Folders that belonged to a man who would never know she had saved him from himself 3 separate times this week alone. The phone screen lit up in the dark. His name. She let it ring 4 times before she picked up. "Where are you?" Not a question. It never was with him. "Home." She kept her voice even, not cold. Even. There was a difference, and she knew it, and she used it. "The Nakamura contracts close in 6 hours. I need the amendment files on the secondary clause. I left them on your desk." She looked at the folders on her table. The amendment files were in the third one on the left, already flagged in green, because green meant signature ready. She had done that at 11 o'clock last night, before she had done anything else. "They're flagged and ready," she said. "Have someone from the office run them to wherever you are." The pause that followed was exactly 2 seconds long. She had learned to measure his pauses like a seismologist measures tremors. 2 seconds meant he was recalibrating. 3 seconds meant she had said something he had not expected. 4 seconds meant the ground was about to move. "I need you there." "No." The word came out clean. No hedge, no softener. Just the word, sitting in the dark kitchen between them. "Send someone else." The line went quiet for 1 long beat, and Camille realized she was not afraid. That was the thing. She had picked up this phone expecting to feel the familiar tightening in her chest, the one that had lived behind her breastbone for 4 years, like a tenant who never paid rent. And it wasn't there. Just quiet, just the hum of her refrigerator, and the pre-dawn stillness of her apartment, and the certainty, absolute and bone-deep, that she was done. "Camille, goodbye, Mr. Han." She pressed end. Then she sat in the dark and finished the rest of her tea. His name was Han J1, and the world knew his name the way it knew the names of weather systems, because he arrived without warning and left damage behind. He ran the Han Group through a network of subsidiaries that stretched from Seoul to Chicago to the financial arteries of cities that never said his name out loud but felt his decisions in their balance sheets. The public face was clean: real estate, private equity, technology investment. The private face was the one that made senators take calls at odd hours and made rival executives choose relocation over negotiation. Camille had known both faces for 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days. She had walked into his office as an executive assistant straight out of a corporate career that had been dismantled by a law firm's decision to cut their administrative staff and call it restructuring. She had walked out, just now, in a phone call that lasted less than 90 seconds. She did not write a resignation letter. She did not clear her desk ceremonially or send a farewell email to colleagues who had stopped asking if she was okay 18 months ago because she had stopped answering as if she were. She did not give 2 weeks. She did not give 2 days. She had given 4 years of 12-hour days and missed family dinners and holidays worked, and knowing the exact way he took his coffee in the morning and the precise tone of voice he used when a deal was going wrong before anyone else in the room had registered the shift. She had given everything the job required and a great deal it had no right to ask for, and she was done. What she did not know, what she could not have known, sitting in her kitchen in the November dark with the empty teacup in her hands, was that in approximately 6 hours, her resignation would begin a cascade of events that would cost Han Jae $40 million, 2 partnerships, and the ability to function at all. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome to our family of Quiet Storm lovers and Midnight loyalists. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me what city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Every comment, every like, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep building these stories together. Now, dim the lights. We're just getting started. The first sign that something was wrong came at 6:15 a.m. Marcus Yoon had been Han Jae-won's security director for 7 years. He had seen the man navigate assassination attempts, hostile takeovers, and the kind of family betrayals that other men broke under. He had never seen him rattled. What he saw at 6:15 a.m. was something adjacent to rattled. Something that looked, if Marcus were being precise, like a man who had reached for a structural wall and found nothing there. Where is she? Not a question. Miss James has not come in, sir. Her access badge was inactive as of 6 a.m. It flagged it because, get me the Nakamura files. We've been looking, sir. The files aren't in the standard location on the shared drive. The physical copies that were on her desk have been organized, but not labeled in a way that what? Marcus chose his next words with the precision of a man who understood that the wrong syllable could make a very bad morning worse. The files are labeled by a system that appears to be Miss James's. We haven't been able to identify which folders contain which documents yet. The silence that followed was 4 seconds long. Marcus counted. He had learned to count. Find her, Han Jae-won said. Sir, she hasn't done anything. I didn't say arrest her. A pause. Find her. She was at her sister's kitchen table in Evanston when the first call came. Camille watched her phone light up with a number she recognized. Marcus. Han Jae-won's shadow, who she genuinely liked and who had nothing to do with this, and let it go to voicemail. She was eating her sister's French toast. Brianna made it with brioche and too much cinnamon, and Camille had not eaten it in almost a year because she had always been at her desk by the time Brianna's kitchen smelled like anything good. Who keeps calling you? Brianna set a mug of coffee in front of her and leaned against the counter. She was 3 years younger and 2 inches taller and had the particular gift of making people tell her things they hadn't planned to. The office. It's 6 in the morning, I know. Camille, Brianna's voice dropped to the register she used when she was about to say something true and didn't want it deflected. What happened? What happened was 4 years of being indispensable in a way that was never acknowledged out loud. What happened was knowing the business better than half the people in the boardroom and being handed a coffee order rather than a seat at the table. What happened was a Tuesday in September, when she had corrected a critical error in the CO Group merger documents, an error that would have cost the company $8 million and potentially triggered a fraud investigation, and had received a thank you that lasted 4 seconds before he moved on to the next agenda item. What happened was that she had done the math, finally, and the math was simple. She had made herself so necessary that her necessity had become invisible. A problem only became visible the moment it disappeared. I quit, Camille said. Brianna picked up her coffee. She did not look surprised. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for this sentence for a long time and had simply not known which morning it would arrive on. Okay, Brianna said. Eat your toast. By 9 o'clock, the Nakamura contract was 3 hours from closing, and the Han Group's senior legal team had spent 2 of those hours trying to reconstruct the amendment files from email chains, draft documents, and the collective memory of 4 associates who each remembered something different about what version was final. At 9:15, Han Jae-won told them to stop. The Nakamura closing is postponed. The room, a conference room that cost more per hour than most people made in a week, went very still. Stephen Park, the lead attorney, measured his words carefully. J1, the penalty clause on a postponement is, I know what the penalty clause is. He said it quietly. The quiet was the warning. Postpone it. He walked out of the conference room and into his office and closed the door, which he never did, and stood at the window that looked south toward Chicago's sprawling, indifferent morning, and did something he could not remember doing in years. He thought about a person, not about her function, not about what she knew and what it would take to retrieve it, not about the logistical catastrophe her absence had created in under 3 hours. He thought about her. The exact way she walked into a room and took stock of it before she said anything. The particular precision of her handwriting on the physical documents she preferred for anything she considered important. The way she had said goodbye, clean, with no inflection, no apology, no door left open, like she had made a decision so far back that this morning was only the formal paperwork. He had said her name, and she had not hesitated. He pulled out his phone. He did not call Marcus. He did not call HR or legal or anyone whose job it would be to retrieve what she knew and put it back in company hands. He found her number, and he called it directly, which he had done approximately 4 times in 4 years, always for something urgent, always something he could not get through anyone else. It rang 6 times. She did not pick up. He held the phone for a moment, which was not something he did, and then he set it on his desk and looked at the south wall of Chicago and understood, with the slow precision of a man who was very rarely wrong and did not enjoy being wrong, that he had made an error. Not a business error, a different kind. She had blocked his number by 10 o'clock, not out of anger, out of clarity. She was methodical about it the same way she had been methodical about everything. She identified what needed to happen, and she made it happen. And she did not narrate the process to herself while she was doing it. She blocked the number, and then she walked to Brianna's guest room and lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling and waited for what she actually felt to arrive. What arrived was not relief exactly. It was something more like the absence of weight. She had been carrying something for so long that the shape of it had become the shape of her. The particular way she held her shoulders, the way she answered her phone before the second ring, the way she had stopped planning anything on a Sunday because Sunday had become the day she prepared for Monday and everything Monday would require. And now the weight was gone, and she was learning in real time what her own outline felt like without it. The ceiling of Brianna's guest room was painted the color of pale fog. Camille looked at it for a long time. The thing about Han Jae-won that she had never let herself say out loud, not to Brianna, not to her best friend Tara, not to the journal she kept and wrote in only when things became too large for her to hold, was that he was not a bad man. He was a contained man. He was a man who had learned, through some process she had never been fully able to trace. That control was the only form of safety he trusted. He ran everything, the business, the meetings, the negotiations, the temperature of a room, because he had learned somewhere that things left unrun fell apart and took people with them when they fell. She had never been able to resent him for it. She had only been able to recognize it and understand it, and eventually realize that understanding a man's reasons for treating you like a resource did not obligate you to keep being one. She closed her eyes. She was 34 years old. She had a master's degree in business administration, fluency in Korean that she had built over 7 years, because her mother had loved K-dramas and passed that love like an inheritance, and 4 years of experience running an empire that didn't have her name on it. She was starting over. She had done harder things. The cascade took 8 days. The Nakamura postponement cost $400,000 in penalty fees. That was the first domino. The second was the Park Group due diligence package. a 1,200-page document that Camille had been assembling for 6 weeks, piece by piece, from sources that required relationships she had spent years cultivating, and which lived, in its complete and organized form, only in a drive folder she had named with a code that seemed arbitrary to everyone who tried to open it, and was not arbitrary at all. 2 junior associates spent 3 days trying to reconstruct it. They recovered 60%. The third domino was a meeting with the city council committee that Camille had been managing through a series of intermediaries. A process so delicate and so dependent on timing and specific communication styles that when Marcus tried to replicate it based on her email archive, the committee chair stopped taking calls from the Han group entirely. By day 8, Han Jae-won had spent approximately $40 million learning what Camille James was worth. He sat in his office on the 8th day and looked at the damage report Marcus had prepared. And then he put the damage report down, and he said, with the particular flatness of a man who has arrived at an understanding he would have preferred not to reach, "What does she want?" Marcus blinked. "Sir? She didn't leave because of the money." He said it like a statement, not a question. "Because it wasn't. She didn't leave because of the work. She's good at the work. She knows she's good at it." He paused. "Find out what she wants. Then get me a meeting. She's blocked your number. I know she blocked my number." He looked at Marcus with the expression he used when he was being patient at cost. "Get me a meeting." She was at a coffee shop in Wicker Park on day 9 when someone sat down across from her without being invited. The person was not Han Jae-won. It was a woman Camille recognized after a moment, Ji Young, one of the Han Group's senior strategists, whose English was precise and whose ability to sit through a meeting without tipping her hand was something Camille had respected in the way you respected a skill that required real work to develop. Miss James Ji Young set a business card on the table between them. Not the Han Group's card, a plain white card with a number on it. He asked me to come. I want to be clear that I was reluctant. Camille looked at the card and did not pick it up. "Why reluctant?" "Because I've worked there for 3 years, Ji Young said. And I understand why you left. And I was concerned that asking you to consider coming back might be something you'd find offensive, and I told him so." A beat. He said you would at least listen. He was not certain. He said about 60% certain, which is the highest I have ever heard him assess the probability of someone agreeing with him on anything. Camille said nothing for a moment. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "What does he want?" "He wants to meet. He would like to propose something." Ji Young said it carefully. "Not your old position. Something else." "Tell him." Camille stopped. Started again. "Tell him I'll decide if I'm coming to a meeting after I've heard what the meeting is about. He doesn't get to just say something else and get a yes." Ji Young's expression shifted. Something that was almost, not quite, but almost, approval. "I'll tell him that." She rose, then paused. "For what it's worth, Miss James, he hasn't been this." She considered the word carefully, focused on anything that wasn't a deal, "in the 3 years I've worked for him." Camille picked up the plain white card. She did not call the number for 4 days. She used the time to do something she had not done in years. She thought about what she wanted. Not what she was qualified for. Not what was available. What she wanted. She made a list. She revised the list. She threw out the first version because it was written defensively, a list of things she wanted to prove, and wrote a second version from a different place. Then she called. He answered on the first ring. The silence after she said his name, not Mr. Han, his name, lasted exactly 3 seconds, not 2. 3. Thank you for calling, he said. No executive voice? Something quieter. $40 million, she said. Approximately, that's the conservative estimate of what the last 8 days cost. Yes, I didn't do that on purpose. I want you to know that. The files were organized. Anyone paying attention could have found them. I know. A pause. They weren't paying attention. They weren't paying attention because they didn't have to. I was. She said it without edge. Just fact. That's the problem. The silence this time was different. Not recalibrating. Something else. You're right, he said. She had been prepared for a negotiation. She had not been prepared for that. The bluntness of it. The absence of qualification. The meeting, she said after a beat. Yes, I want to offer you. I want to propose that you come on as Chief Operating Officer. Actual title, actual authority, actual seat at the table. He said it steadily. And I want to discuss what else would need to change for you to consider it. Camille looked out the window of her sister's guest room at November's bare trees and the pale winter sky behind them. She felt the thing she had been feeling for 8 days, the absence of weight, and she understood, with clear eyes, that taking this meeting was not going back. Going back would have been taking her old position. This was something different. This was the recognition she had earned, finally, landing in a form she could accept. Where and when, she said. They met in a restaurant that was not a restaurant. It was a private dining room in the Wiltshire Hotel that only existed for people who could close both the room and the floor beneath it. She arrived 5 minutes early and was the only person there. She ordered water and sat with her back to the wall, a habit she had developed in her first year of working for him without ever consciously noticing where she had learned it. He arrived 3 minutes later. Not late. Not power playing. 3 minutes after her. She noted it. He looked different without the armor of the office around him. The same. Controlled. Still. The kind of still that spoke of something underneath, held deliberately in check, but different. He sat across from her and did not order anything. He looked at her the way he never had in 4 years and 2 months and 11 days, directly, without the buffer of an agenda between them. You know, he said, that I notice everything that happens in that building. Yes, she said. I noticed that the amendments were flagged in green. He said it quietly. In September, when you corrected the CO error. I noticed before I said thank you and moved to the next item. He was quiet for a moment. I moved too fast. Camille said nothing. She let it sit. She had waited 4 years for an acknowledgement. She was not going to hurry the receiving of it. I have been told, he continued, by G. Young and by 3 other people who don't volunteer information without reason, that the way I have run that office is not wrong. Exactly. He seemed to consider the word and find it approximate. Incomplete. Incomplete, she repeated. People who are indispensable should know it. People who are indispensable, she said carefully, should be treated as partners, not as infrastructure. Something moved in his expression. Not much. Enough? Yes, he said. They talked for 2 hours. Not about the COO offer, not yet. That conversation required lawyers and formalities and a world more structure than a dinner table allowed. They talked about the work itself. The Nakamura deal, and why she had flagged the secondary clause 6 weeks before it became a problem. The Park Group package and the specific relationships it required, and who in the Han Group had the capacity to manage them. The city council situation, which was recoverable but required care. She laid it out the way she had always laid things out, clearly, without performance. Because the work was what it was, and dressing it up in anything else was a waste of both their time. He listened the way she had always noticed he listened, which was the thing about him she had always, quietly, respected. completely. No phone. No glancing at the door. He asked questions that told her he had heard what she actually said, not what he had expected her to say. He pushed back on one point, the park group timeline, and she pushed back on his pushback, and he listened to that too. And then he said, "You're right," for the second time that evening, and she noted that the count was 2, and that each one cost him something she could see him paying. When they were done with the work, the conversation did something she had not planned for. It slowed. The restaurant hushed around them. The room's discreet staff had appeared and disappeared throughout without her fully registering it. Another sign of how deeply she had been focused. And it was late. And the food had been cleared. And there were 2 coffee cups between them, and nothing else. "You could have come back to the office," he said. It was not an accusation. It was something more careful. After the CO correction. "You had leverage you didn't use." "I didn't want leverage," she said. "I wanted things to be different without having to threaten anything to make them different." She looked at him steadily. "That's why I left instead." He was quiet for a moment. Then, that was the right call. She raised an eyebrow, which was as much surprise as her face showed for most things. "It was the only thing that worked," he said. "I don't respond to. I have learned not to respond to pressure that comes from people who need something from me. I've learned to outlast it." Something shifted in his expression. Careful. Measured. "I respond to absence. To consequences I didn't engineer." A pause. "I should have responded earlier." The silence between them was different from the silences of the last 4 years. Those had been professional. Functional. The silence of 2 people on the same side of a project, with nothing personal between them. This one had something in it she did not have a fast word for. "One condition," she said. "Name it." "The title is real. The authority is real. I don't manage the work invisibly while someone else gets the credit. If my name is on a decision, my name is on a decision." Out loud. "Yes, and if anything changes, if the title is real but the seat at the table somehow isn't, I will leave again." Without a second conversation. He looked at her for a moment. "I understand." "I don't need you to just understand," she said. "I need you to know that I mean it." The 3-second pause. "I know you mean it." She nodded. One small decisive nod. Then she picked up her coffee and finished it, and set the cup down and looked at a man she had worked for and outgrown and departed and returned to on new terms, and felt the thing she had been waiting to feel. Not triumph. Exactly. Not vindication. Something more specific than either. The exact feeling of being in the right room, at the right table, in the right role. "Finally, send the contract to my attorney," she said. "I'll review it by end of week." He almost smiled. She noticed because she had learned to notice everything, and also because it was the kind of almost smile that a very controlled man produces when something has moved him against his better calculation. And she filed it away in the part of her that noticed things and did not yet know what to do with them. "End of week," he said. She stood and smoothed her coat and walked out of the room that was not a restaurant into a November night that had finally gotten cold enough to mean it, and flagged a cab and called Brianna and said 3 words, "I'll tell you everything." What she did not say. What lived. Quiet and precise and specific. In the part of her that kept inventory of what she actually felt was that something had shifted at that table. Not just the terms, something underneath the terms. Some awareness of each other that the formality of the last 4 years had kept muffled, and that 2 hours at a table without an agenda between them had made undeniable. She was a woman who was methodical about most things. She decided to be patient about this one. He sat in the empty room for 12 minutes after she left. He was not thinking about the contract. He was not thinking about the Nakamura closing, or the park group, or the city council situation, or any of the $40 million that her 8-day absence had cost him. He was thinking about the word condition, and the way she had said it, like she had given it weight before she said it out loud, like she had walked into this room already knowing what she would not compromise on, and had simply waited for the right moment to place it on the table. He had built an empire on knowing what moved and what didn't, on reading the room, the leverage, the person across the table. He was, by any honest accounting, rarely wrong about people. He had been wrong about her for 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days. He had seen indispensability and called it infrastructure. He had seen something that now, sitting alone in the quiet of the room she had just left, he understood he did not yet have a clean word for. He was very methodical about naming things correctly. He would give himself time. She didn't need him to say it. He was already listening differently. And for a man like Han Jae-won, listening differently was everything. Thank you so much for writing this out with us, Quiet Storm lovers. If this one landed the way I hope it did, drop a like. Share it with your person. And, most importantly, tell me your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story has traveled tonight. Subscribe if you're new. We build these worlds every week, and I want you here for the next one. The next story? A maid finds a dying man in a penthouse she was hired to clean, and the information she carries out of that room will shake 3 governments. I'll see you there.